The wedding night that lasted 7 days, a medieval horror legend. They say the bells of Saint Aveline rang for 7 days and 7 nights, though no hand ever touched the ropes. They rang by themselves, tolling through fog and storm, echoing across the moors like a warning from God. And on the 7th night the bride stopped screaming. Her name was Lady Eleanor of Montclaire, daughter of a dying noble house whose lands had been swallowed by war and debt. Her marriage was not for love, it was payment. The groom, Lord Corvin of Blackmere, was a man whispered about even by his own priests, the kind of man who smiled during funerals and collected relics of the dead. He was said to have served as a crusader in the East, though others claimed he had never fought for Christ, but for himself. When his messengers arrived at Montclaire, the family chapel was already half ruined. They brought gold, parchment, and a single condition. The wedding must take place before the next full moon. No one asked why. The arrival. On the morning of her wedding, Eleanor was pale as frost. The chapel was filled with smoke from too many candles, an old superstition, they said, to keep spirits from attending. Her veil was woven from black lace instead of white. The priest trembled as he read the vows. When he came to the words, "Until death do you part," Lord Corvin corrected him. "Until after death," he said softly. The priest hesitated, but the gold on the altar was heavy, and the eyes of the guests, hollow knights, widows, merchants dressed in mourning, were fixed upon him like tombstones. So he finished the rite, and the bells tolled once. Outside, the wind began to rise. The first night, the feast was held in Corvin's castle, a fortress carved into the cliffs above the Blackmere Lake, where the water reflected no stars. The servants did not speak. The torches burned greenish as if fed by oil and not flame. Eleanor was seated at the head of the table beside her husband, yet she felt as though she were attending her own funeral. No one ate, no one drank. They only watched her. When the hour grew late, Corvin rose. He offered his hand to her and she followed him into the upper halls. Behind them, the guests began to sing, low, wordless hymns that sounded more like lamentations than celebration. It was said that the bedchamber door closed by itself. That night, lightning struck the chapel tower, splitting the cross in two. The second day. At dawn, the servants found the bride's crown of roses floating in the basin of holy water outside her chamber. The petals had turned black. Lord Corvin appeared at breakfast alone. His voice was calm, polite, almost cheerful. "The lady rests," he said. "The night was long." When the chaplain asked to see her, Corvin merely smiled. "She is not to be disturbed." That day, he ordered the gates locked. No messenger, no merchant, no prayer left the walls. By evening, the bells began to ring again, without wind, without hands. The third night. Some claimed they heard laughter echoing through the halls, soft and hollow, like a woman's voice carried through water. Others said it was weeping. One maid swore she saw the Lady Eleanor walking the courtyard, barefoot, her wedding dress dragging behind her as if soaked through. She spoke to no one. When the maid ran to fetch her lord, Eleanor had vanished. Only footprints remained, leading toward the crypt below the chapel. Corvin forbade anyone to enter the crypt again. That night, the sound of chanting rose from beneath the floors, a rhythm not of prayer, but invocation. The fourth night rain lashed against the windows. The torches would not stay lit. Corvin sat alone in the great hall, a chalice of wine in his hand. His eyes were fever bright, as though he hadn't slept in days. When his steward asked if the lady lived, he laughed. "Alive? Yes, in more ways than you could understand." The steward resigned that same night, leaving through the servants' gate before dawn. They found his body 3 miles from the castle, hands clasped as if in prayer, eyes burned white. Inside the castle, Eleanor's music box began to play by itself. The 5th night. By now, the village below refused to look toward Blackmere Hill. Dogs barked at the empty road. Children were kept indoors. The priest who had wed them returned to demand an answer. He found the doors open, the halls silent, and every candle in the chapel melted to its base. On the altar lay a parchment written in a trembling hand. "The wedding is not yet over. She has not spoken the final vow." The priest fled into the storm, raving about a union unblessed by heaven but sanctified in hell. The next day his tongue was found nailed to the chapel door. The 6th night. The castle was empty now, save for Corvin, the bride, and whatever else walked between their rooms. The servants had fled or gone mad. It was said that from the moor, travelers could see a faint red light burning in the high tower, pulsing like a heartbeat, and at its center, a woman's shadow turning in slow circles as if dancing. The 7th night. The bells began tolling again before midnight. Every strike seemed to shake the valley itself. In the great hall, the feast table had been set once more. Goblets brimmed with dark liquid. Empty chairs waited for guests who would never come. At the head of the table sat Lord Corvin and his bride. She wore no veil now. Her skin was pale as wax, her eyes glimmering like mirrors filled with moonlight. 7 nights, she said softly. You promised me 7 nights. Corvin reached for her hand, and when their fingers touched, the candles extinguished themselves. What happened after, no one can say. When the villagers finally climbed the hill at dawn, the castle was cold, its halls dusted with ash. Every mirror was shattered, every cross inverted. And on the altar of Saint Aveline lay 2 wedding rings, one gold, one iron, fused together by heat. The bells never rang again. Years later, travelers passing through Montclaire claimed to see the ruins of Blackmere Castle glowing faintly on certain nights, as though lit by 1,000 candles. Some heard music, slow and haunting, drifting from the empty windows. Others swore they saw 2 figures standing on the tower, hand in hand watching the world below. They say if you listen closely, you can hear the bride whisper, "The wedding is not yet over." And the wind will carry back a man's voice, soft and smiling, until after death.